I want you to picture a deeply familiar moment, just a really everyday situation. It is early morning.
Right. Like the sun hasn't even quite breached the horizon yet.
Exactly. The house is completely still. The air in your kitchen is cool. The world is quiet. And you're just standing there holding a warm cup of coffee.
Yeah, you can literally feel the heat of the ceramic against your palm.
And the day ahead of you is, well, it's a complete blank slate.
A totally fresh start.
Right. But before you even take a single sip, before your body has even fully registered that you are, actually awake, your mind begins to drift.
It just wanders off.
Yeah, and it snags on an argument you had the day before. Or maybe it jumps ahead to a looming heavy deadline at work.
And immediately, almost violently, your chest just tightens up.
Your gut clenches. Your breathing grows shallow and rapid.
And just like that, the peaceful stillness of that early morning is completely shattered by this invisible force.
It really is. And, well, we've pulled together a massive stack of research today for this exploration. We're looking at everything from, peer-reviewed papers on neurobiology and the chemistry of stress to theories on the physics of electromagnetism.
Plus some really rigorous clinical observations on how human consciousness actually works.
Yeah, exactly. Our mission for this analysis today is to map out the invisible architecture of your emotions. We really want to understand the exact physical mechanics of your personal reality.
And more importantly, how you can literally rewire your biology to stop, well, surviving the echoes of your past.
Right, and start actively designing the magnetism of your future. So let's start with that morning coffee scenario.
Okay, let's do it.
Why do you wake up possessing the profound gift of a blank slate and immediately choose to step right back into the heavy, worn-out shoes of yesterday?
Well, it's actually a tragedy of human biology. And it plays out in countless kitchens at the dawn of every single day.
It's so common.
It is. I mean, look at the physical reality of your situation. In that exact moment, you are in absolute safety.
But they're just standing in your own kitchen.
Yeah, bathed in soft light, holding a comforting beverage. There are literally no predators stalking you.
No tigers in the living room.
Exactly. There is no immediate crisis demanding physical action. Yet biologically, at a cellular level, your body is suddenly reacting as if you were in the very center of a life-threatening emergency.
Which is wild to think about. Why does the brain do that?
The answer lies in, well, the fundamental way your nervous system interacts with time.
Okay, how so?
Your brain is essentially a master recording device. It is exquisitely designed to recognize patterns and anticipate threats based on your past experiences.
So it's always looking backward to figure out what's coming next.
Right. But when those past experiences are rooted in chronic stress, anxiety, or pain, your mind becomes this flawless, inescapable record of the past.
Wow. Okay.
To really understand this, you have to recognize the division of labor in your biology. Thoughts are the language of the brain. Feelings are the language of the body.
Wait, let me stop you right there, just to make sure we're grounding this in the physical mechanics rather than just using a metaphor.
Sure.
When you say a thought is the language of the brain, what is actually happening in the tissue inside your skull when that intrusive memory of yesterday's argument pops up?
Well, a thought is literally an electrical impulse.
Just electricity.
Yeah. When you recall that argument, a specific constellation of neurons fires in your brain.
Okay.
And that electrical spark is not just some ephemeral wisp of imagination, It acts as a direct signal to a part of your brain called the hypothalamus,
The hypothalamus, right.
which basically operates like a chemical assembly line. The hypothalamus immediately begins producing highly specific chemical messengers called neuropeptides.
And these neuropeptides, they match the thought.
Exactly. They perfectly match the signature of that thought. So you think an angry thought, your brain manufactures the chemistry of anger.
And then what? It just sits there.
No, it flushes that chemistry straight into your bloodstream.
Oh, wow. So within seconds of having that passing thought, the blood carrying these chemicals reaches the cells of your entire body.
Right. And the body is completely objective. It receives this chemical flood and instantly experiences the feeling of anger.
It just obeys the chemical?
Exactly. Your heart rate alters, your muscles tense up. You are now feeling exactly the way you were thinking.
And this creates a loop, doesn't it?
A massive loop.
Because once your body is flooded with the chemistry of anger, it sends a signal back up the spinal cord to the brain, effectively saying, hey, we are angry down here.
Yeah. Match this energy.
Right. So the brain, registering this physical state, begins to generate more thoughts that match the feeling of anger, just to justify the state the body is already in.
It is a continuous, self-sustaining tide. You think a thought, which creates a chemical, which creates a feeling, which then generates a matching thought.
It's exhausting just talking about it.
It really is. And if you cannot consciously intervene in this process, your body essentially usurps the throne of your consciousness.
The body becomes the mind.
The body becomes the mind. It is now dictating your thoughts based entirely on the chemical residue of your past experiences.
So you aren't even living in the present morning anymore.
Not at all. You are biologically reliving the history of your pain.
You know, look at how easily you might have normalized living in this state of, like, low-grade emergency.
And people do it constantly.
You just walk around assuming that a baseline level of anxiety or a simmering resentment or that persistent knot of fear in your stomach is just what it means to be a functioning adult in the modern world.
Right, you treat it as the atmospheric pressure of daily life.
Yeah, like it's just the weather.
But that assumption is profoundly dangerous. Biologically speaking, those emotions are altered states of consciousness.
Altered states.
Yeah, they're born of ancient survival instincts. You know, the fight-or-flight mechanisms designed to save you from immediate physical danger, like fleeing a predator.
Which are supposed to be rare.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They're designed for short, intense bursts of energy. But when you're constantly trickling this survival chemistry into your system, hour after hour, day after day, you knock your entire organism completely out of its natural balance.
You're just constantly draining the battery.
Right. And over a vast span of time, that chronic imbalance simply becomes your highly dysfunctional normal.
You know the sensory reality of this loop so intimately. It is that twitchy physical urge to reach into your pocket for your phone the literal second you feel a lull.
Oh, yeah. Seeking that tiny, fleeting hit of dopamine.
Exactly, just to offset a lingering, heavy feeling of emptiness. Or it's the bitter taste of a grudge you rehearse in the shower.
Reversing the argument.
Yeah, you play out the argument, you invent the absolute perfect comeback, and honestly, it feels oddly comfortable.
It does. It feels familiar.
It is like an old, scratchy blanket you've had for a vast portion of your life that you just can't seem to throw away, even though it actively makes you itch.
The scratchy blanket represents the familiar past. And the familiarity of that suffering provides a strange, twisted kind of comfort to the human nervous system.
But this is where my logic hits a wall, and I really have to challenge this behavior.
Okay, boy on me.
If these emotions, the resentment, the anxiety, the guilt, if they make you feel objectively terrible, why on earth do you cling to them?
That's a great question.
I mean, why would your highly evolved brain choose the scratchy blanket every single morning when it makes you so miserable?
Because the primitive centers of your brain prioritize survival over happiness.
Survival over happiness.
Always. To your nervous system, survival is entirely dependent on predicting the environment. The known, even if the known is incredibly painful, is predictable.
So at least you know what's going to happen.
Exactly. You know how to survive your daily anger. You know how to navigate your persistent guilt. To step out of that familiar suffering, to truly drop that scratchy blanket, means stepping into the vast, unpredictable void of the unknown.
So feeling miserable is literally safer to the brain than feeling nothing at all.
It is perceived as safer, yes. The brain's logic is brutal but highly effective.
Yeah.
It basically says, I have survived feeling this anger for a long time. If I let go of it and step into an unfamiliar state of peace or joy, I lose my predictive power.
I don't know what's coming next.
Right. I don't know what will happen next, which means I might be vulnerable to an attack.
Yeah.
So your cells actually adapt to this chemistry over time.
They adapt to the stress.
Yes. The receptor sites on your cells desensitize, which means they require a greater and greater chemical thrill just to feel the same baseline level of familiar anger or sadness.
Wow. So you build a tolerance to your own misery.
You become biologically addicted to your own stress chemistry. You romance your pain because eventually it defines your very identity.
That implies that without your problems, without your familiar frustrations, you suddenly don't even know who you are.
You don't.
You are clinging to the very things that are destroying your health just to maintain a cohesive sense of self.
And recognizing the sheer mechanical nature of this addiction is literally the only way to dismantle it.
Because it's not a character flaw.
No, not at all. Once you understand that this loop is not a moral failing, but a chemical and habitual physical process, You realize it can be interrupted.
But interrupting it requires understanding how this internal state doesn't just stay trapped inside your body.
Right, it radiates. We have to examine the architecture of attraction.
Okay, let's get into that. Because if the brain is just playing the records of the past, what physical mechanism actually has the power to dictate what happens to you next?
Now,
The research points to a concept that sounds mystical at first, but is actually grounded in the physics of your biology. You are not a closed circuit. You are constantly broadcasting an electromagnetic signature.
the physics of the human body are undeniable here. We already established that thoughts generate an electrical spark in the brain, right?
Yes, the electrical impulse.
We also know that feelings, driven by the massive chemical shifts in your body we just talked about, generate a magnetic pole.
Okay, so thoughts are electrical, feelings are magnetic.
Exactly. The heart, for instance, generates an electrical field vastly stronger than the brain, and a magnetic field that can physically be measured several feet outside the body.
Wait, really? Outside the body?
Yes, it's measurable. Together, how you think and how you feel creates an electromagnetic signature that entirely surrounds you. This signature is constantly interacting with the environment, actively shaping your personal reality.
The implication of this flips everything completely upside down.
It does.
Most people live in a continuous state of cause and effect. You wait for something good to happen outside of you in the world so that you can finally feel something good inside of you.
And that is the fundamental backwards approach to existence that dominates human behavior.
It's how we're all taught to live.
Right. You wait for the perfect relationship to arrive so you can finally feel love. You wait for the promotion or the windfall so you can finally feel abundant.
You wait for the resolution of a conflict so you can finally feel peace.
Exactly. You are constantly waiting for the external environment to relieve an internal state of emptiness.
It's like you are sitting there with an unmagnetized piece of metal, just hoping another piece of iron will magically fly across the room and attach to it to prove that magnetism exists.
That's a great way to put it. It violates the fundamental laws of resonance. Think about the frequency of your daily practice.
Yeah, okay.
Let's say you deeply want to experience profound love or a deeply fulfilling career.
Sure.
But look closely at your actual habitual practice. You spend your morning feeling intensely impatient in traffic. You spend your afternoon silently resentful of your coworkers. And you spend your evening highly judgmental of strangers on the internet.
So your internal dial is firmly, aggressively set to the frequency of frustration.
Yes, your entire biological system is tuned to the frequency of lack, separation, and judgment. You cannot possibly draw a new, elevated reality towards you with a mismatched emotional signature.
It just repels it.
The surrounding field of possibility does not respond to what you vaguely desire in your conscious mind. It responds to who you are being at a cellular electromagnetic level.
Let's ground this in something relatable, like the modern pursuit of romantic love.
Oh, that's a perfect example.
Because it has devolved into this exhausting mechanical exercise in data processing. You are scrolling through countless profiles late at night, your thumb just swiping across the screen.
Swiping and swiping.
Seeking a perfect external checklist of physical traits and accomplishments. But internally, as you are doing this, you feel completely drained.
You feel exhausted.
You feel lonely, you feel a lingering bitterness from past rejections, and you feel quietly unworthy.
So you are broadcasting an intense signal of lack while demanding an experience of abundance.
It is the equivalent of trying to light a roaring fire with wood that has been submerged at the bottom of a lake for an eternity.
Wow. Yeah.
The material is technically there, but the condition of the material makes the spark completely impossible. You can strike the match as many times as you want, but the friction just creates smoke, frustration, and exhaustion.
And yet, what is the common response in that situation? You blame the wood.
And apps are broken.
You declare that there are no good matches left in the world or that the algorithms are entirely against you, completely ignoring the reality of the dense, heavy emotional state you are bringing to the interaction.
You don't even see your own broadcast.
If you approach a potential connection anchored entirely in the neurology and chemistry of your past pain, you will literally look right past a beautiful opportunity.
Because it doesn't match your frequency.
You will not recognize the pattern of healthy love because your brain is only wired to recognize the pattern of your familiar suffering.
Man, I have to challenge the alternative, though. Because the proposed solution feels highly counterintuitive, and my logical mind rejects it almost instantly.
I hear that a lot. What's the block?
The idea is that you have to feel immense gratitude or profound love for a relationship or an event that absolutely has not happened yet.
Right.
How do you bypass the deeply ingrained demand for external evidence? I mean, why would anyone celebrate an empty room?
You bypass the skepticism of the conscious mind by understanding a core physiological truth. The body is entirely objective and surprisingly blind.
Blind.
Yes, it is a brilliant, highly responsive biological machine, but it cannot differentiate between an external event occurring in your physical environment
Hmm.
and an internal emotion fabricated entirely by your intentional thought.
Hold on. A racing heart from fear has a clear survival function. It pumps blood to your extremities so you can run from a physical threat.
Exactly.
Why would the body be objective about joy? There is no evolutionary reason for the body to physically manifest a future joy before it happens. It just sounds like a biological glitch.
It is not a glitch. It is an evolutionary leap. While your lower survival centers are entirely reactionary, designed purely for fleeing predators or fighting rivals, your frontal lobe, the newest and most advanced part of your brain, is designed for creation.
Okay, so it operates differently.
When you close your eyes and vividly recall a terrifying memory, your body reacts with cortisol as if the threat is currently in the room. The threat is an illusion, but the biology is very real.
Right. We've all felt that panic from just a thought.
The exact same mechanism works in reverse for elevated emotions. If you sit in stillness and conjure the profound feeling of gratitude, not just thinking the word thanks, but generating the visceral physiological sensation of being deeply thankful, your body begins to alter its chemistry.
It starts making the neuropeptides of joy.
Yes, it begins to believe that the event causing the gratitude is happening in the present moment.
So by feeling the joy before the event, you are giving your body a biological sampling of the future.
Beautifully said.
You are upgrading your chemistry to match the reality you want to experience, signaling new genes in new ways.
You are moving from a passive state of cause and effect to an active state of causing an effect. You are deliberately altering your mass and your frequency.
But this requires immense discipline.
Oh, absolute discipline. Because the moment you open your eyes, the material world will assault your senses and try to pull you right back into reaction.
Which brings us to the friction of daily life. It is one thing to feel like a glowing beacon of peace while sitting quietly in your living room, right?
Sure, that's the easy part.
But it is an entirely different reality when you step out the door and the world immediately tests you. This is where the concept of the refractory period becomes critical.
To be human is to experience the friction of the environment. Everyone reacts to life.
Of course.
The true measure of your evolution, the true sign of biological mastery, is not the total absence of reaction. You are not trying to become an unfeeling stone.
That wouldn't be healthy either.
No. The goal is the ability to shorten the refractory period.
Let's define that clearly. The refractory period is the duration of your reaction.
Yes.
It is how long you allow the chemical storm to rage inside your body after the initial trigger has actually passed.
It is the span of time it takes for your nervous system to return to a baseline state of equilibrium. For some people, a minor slight at a social gathering has a refractory period that spans a vast number of cycles.
Like they hold on to it for years.
They carry that bitterness, rehearsing the conversation in their minds, allowing it to subtly poison their interactions for an indefinite period.
Yeah.
For others, a bad mood might last a few days.
Right.
The ultimate goal of self-regulation is to shorten that period to hours, then minutes, and eventually to mere moments.
The primary obstacle to shortening that period is something we fall for constantly, the trap of justification.
Oh, the ego loves to justify.
When someone wrongs you, your analytical mind leaps into action like a highly paid defense attorney to justify your anger.
Yes, let me build a case.
You recount the story to literally anyone who will listen. You say, "Look at what they did. I have every right to be furious." And by justifying it, you continuously generate a cascade of matching thoughts, which produce more corresponding survival chemicals.
You use the external event as a dealer to supply your addiction to your own stress hormones.
Wow. A dealer.
You point to the person who wronged you and assign them total blame for your internal state. But the harsh truth is, you are choosing to keep the chemical drip flowing because the rush of anger feels powerful and validating.
It feels good in a sick
You
way.
would rather be right in your anger than be free in your peace.
Let's play this out second by second in a scenario everyone knows. You are driving on the highway.
Yep.
You are running a bit late, but you are relatively calm. The radio is playing. Suddenly, a car swerves violently across 3 lanes and cuts you off so sharply you have to slam on the brakes.
Terrifying.
Your tires squeal. Instantly, before you even have time to form a conscious thought, your hands grip the steering wheel with white-knuckle force. Your heart begins pounding against your ribs like a hammer.
Pure survival response.
The instinctive animal urge rises in your throat to curse, to lean heavily on the horn, to accelerate and retaliate, to just match their chaotic energy with your own.
In that singular fraction of a moment, your autonomic nervous system has completely hijacked your body.
Yeah.
You're experiencing a massive overdose of survival chemistry.
You're flooded.
Completely flooded.
Yeah.
Your sympathetic nervous system is fully engaged. Adrenaline and cortisol are surging through your bloodstream. Blood is rushing away from your digestive organs and into your extremities so you can fight or flee.
Your pupils dilate.
Your focus narrows to a tiny, sharp pinpoint on the object of your threat. That other car. You are in full fight or flight mode.
No, the conventional wisdom we have absorbed for decades, the standard pop psychology advice is that it is healthier to just let that anger out.
Right. Express your truth.
We are constantly warned about the dangers of bottling things up. The advice is to scream in your car, hit a pillow, vent to your friends until you feel better. If you just suppress that rage, doesn't it turn inward and cause illness?
That is a profound misunderstanding of how the nervous system learns and adapts.
Wait, really? So venting is bad?
Venting, screaming, or stewing in the emotion does not release the anger. It actively memorizes it deeper into the tissues of your body.
Oh, wow.
When you act out the anger, you are siring and wiring the specific neural pathways associated with rage. You are strengthening the synaptic connection.
You're practicing it.
You are essentially practicing being angry, ensuring that the next time you face a minor inconvenience, your reaction will be even faster and vastly more intense. You are training your body to be a hair trigger mechanism.
So if venting is just practicing rage and suppressing it is ignoring a blazing fire, what is the actual biological alternative in that car when you're gripping the wheel?
The alternative is mastering the power of the pause. Mastering your state isn't about ignoring the emotion. It's about asking yourself a highly disruptive question in the absolute heat of the moment. At what exact point am I done feeling this?
At what point am I done? You are forcing an endpoint onto an automatic process.
You are asserting conscious control over an unconscious cascade. It is the profound Herculean act of stepping away from the trigger internally.
That sounds incredibly hard.
It is. You recognize the massive overdose of stress chemistry. You feel the intense heat in your face. You observe the racing of your heart. And instead of letting those sensations dictate your behavior, you consciously decide, I am biologically out of balance right now.
My system is compromised.
Exactly. I am not going to make a decision, I am not going to speak, and I am not going to react until this internal storm settles.
You literally excuse yourself from the reaction. You pull your attention entirely away from the car that cut you off. Because as long as you stare at the bumper of that car, your brain is continuously fed the visual data to generate angry thoughts.
You have to sever the visual and mental link. You take a slow, deep breath, which begins to engage the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the brake pedal for your stress response.
You force your physical body, against all of its screaming primitive instincts, to relax its posture.
And return to the present moment. You actively shorten the refractory period. Every single time you execute this pause, every time you lower the volume of a survival emotion and return your body to balance, you are exercising a human will that is mathematically greater than your automated programming.
You are domesticating the animal.
That's a great phrase.
You are. And when you start taking that power back, a profound energetic shift occurs. When you start constantly bleeding your vital energy out into the environment through endless, exhausting reactions to traffic, to news, to petty arguments, you suddenly have a massive reservoir of energy available.
A surplus of life force.
The body needs a physical mechanism to utilize this reclaimed energy to build something new. Where does it go?
Moving from a state of pure survival, which keeps all your energy locked in the lower centers of your body, focused entirely on threat detection, digestion, and physical exertion, to a state of creation requires a literal physical shifting of that vital life force.
Upward. Right.
Yes, you have to move that energy upward into the heart center.
This is where we have to strip away the poetry. When we talk about the heart in this context, we are not talking about romance or sentimentality.
No, not at all.
We are talking about the measurable mechanical physiology of coherence. I was stunned reading the research on this. When you feel those familiar survival emotions, frustration, impatience, chronic worry, Your physical heart literally beats
It
differently.
does. It pumps against a closed system, creating a chaotic, jagged, highly erratic rhythm.
It is the biological equivalent of stepping on the gas pedal and the brake pedal of your car at the exact same time.
Yes. The sympathetic nervous system is shouting, accelerate, while the parasympathetic system is shouting, slow down. The heart becomes entirely incoherent.
It's fighting itself.
The energy it produces is fractured and noisy.
Yeah.
But when you consciously cultivate genuine or elevated emotions, profound gratitude, deep compassion, authentic care, the physical heart begins to synchronize.
It beats like a steady, powerful, rhythmic drum.
It enters a state of high coherence.
And that steady drum beat is not just a pleasant internal sensation, it is a mechanical trigger for a massive biological cascade. How exactly does a purely emotional state like gratitude turn into a physical pump function that changes the blood?
It is a beautifully orchestrated chain reaction. When the heart moves into this highly coherent rhythm, it acts as a signal to release a cascade of restorative chemistry. First, oxytocin is released into the system.
The bonding hormone.
Right. Oxytocin then signals the release of nitric oxide. Nitric oxide interacts with another compound called endothelial-derived relaxing factor.
Okay, that's a mouthful. What does that do?
This specific chemical sequence causes the physical arteries in your body to literally engorge and relax. Blood flow increases dramatically. The heart itself physically swells with blood.
So that familiar feeling of your chest bursting with joy or your heart feeling full, that is not a metaphor.
No.
That is literal, measurable blood flow. That is a chemical reaction physically opening the vessels in your chest.
Precisely. The mechanical pump is operating at peak efficiency. And as the heart beats in this powerful, orderly rhythm, it generates a wave of energy that travels physically upward, straight up the nervous system, directly into the brain.
And when that highly coherent wave impacts the brain,
It acts as an override switch. It effectively shuts down the fear centers in the amygdala. The biological lights simply go out on anxiety, aggression, and panic.
I want to replace the mechanical explanation with a visual one for a moment, because the physics of wave mechanics make this so clear.
Okay, go for it.
If you think about living in chronic stress, it is like standing in a shallow pond and frantically splashing the water with a heavy stick. You are expending an enormous amount of physical energy, but you are creating nothing but chaotic noise, unpredictable splashing, and muddy water.
That is a perfect representation of destructive interference and biological incoherence. The waves are crashing into each other, canceling each other out, completely wasting the energy.
But the coherent heart, the heart beating in the rhythm of an elevated emotion, is like dropping a single solitary, perfectly smooth stone into the exact center of a perfectly still pond.
Beautiful.
You watch the flawless concentric ripples expand outward in perfect geometric order. There is no wasted energy. That orderly wave carries a clear signal.
And that orderly wave literally resets the baseline for trauma stored in the nervous system. The heart becomes a magnetic center, broadcasting a coherent signature that begins to organize the chaotic energy around it.
I marvel at the implications of this. The idea that cultivating a feeling of love or immense gratitude is a profound mechanical switch that dictates the health of your cells and the electromagnetic field you emit.
It is real power.
But here is the massive practical hurdle. How do you physically induce this state when you feel completely disconnected?
Yeah, that's the challenge.
When it is a chaotic Tuesday afternoon, your inbox is a disaster, the news cycle is terrifying, and your physical heart feels like a tight, cold, defensive knot.
You cannot expect to perform a complex biological maneuver in the middle of a battlefield if you have never practiced it in the safety of a quiet room.
That makes sense.
You have to practice coherence when the stakes are low, so your nervous system knows how to utilize it when the stakes are high. You must integrate the practice into your daily life.
And how do we start?
It begins with a seemingly simple, yet incredibly difficult act of slowing down, removing yourself entirely from external sensory input, sitting still, closing your eyes, and intentionally remembering the emotion of a beautiful future.
Remembering the future. That phrasing forces the brain to short-circuit its normal relationship with time.
Exactly. You deliberately marry a clear intention, a specific vision of who you want to be or what you want to experience, with an elevated emotion.
You just sit there.
You sit in the darkness behind your closed eyes, and you stubbornly refuse to get up until your physical body yields to that new emotional state. You practice feeling the immense gratitude of a healing before the physical healing has occurred.
You practice the exuberance of a new connection before the person arrives.
Right. You drum that rhythmic coherence into the heart until it becomes your familiar baseline.
And as the heart opens and sends that smooth, orderly, concentric wave upward, the brain begins to undergo its own radical transformation.
You have to respond to the signal.
The brain receives the signal and begins to shift gears, moving through distinct states of consciousness. We are moving from the mechanics of the heart into the symphony of the brain.
And to truly understand the symphony, we first have to acknowledge the deafening noise that precedes it.
Right.
You spend the overwhelming majority of your waking life in a hypervigilant, highly analytical state. Your brain waves are firing in a rapid chaotic frequency known as high beta.
High beta.
In this state, your attention is entirely consumed by the external environment. You are constantly processing sensory data, anticipating threats, calculating the passage of time, managing your endless schedule, and judging everything around you.
It is a fractured, exhausting use of energy. I liken this chaotic brain state to a massive room full of people shouting over each other.
Yeah, a chaotic party.
Everyone is talking at maximum volume, no one is listening, and the sheer noise is paralyzing. That is your analytical mind frantically trying to solve the complex problems of the material world while being fueled by the survival emotions of the past.
It is the ultimate biological bottleneck. You cannot possibly solve a problem with the exact same level of mind that created it.
So you have to change the frequency.
You must escape the noise of the beta frequency. And the gateway to reprogramming this chaotic system is through absolute stillness. By sitting down, closing your eyes, and removing visual and auditory input, your brain is suddenly starved of the massive stream of environmental data it usually processes.
It has nothing to analyze.
In the absence of external threat detection, its rhythm naturally begins to slow down.
The shouting room starts to quiet down, the people stop yelling and sit in their chairs. You shift from beta into alpha.
As you move into alpha, the critical, analytical voice, the relentless narrator that says, "You can't do this, it's too hard, remember how you failed last time?" That voice begins to fade into the background.
It loses its grip.
You cross the bridge from the conscious, analytical mind into the realm of the subconscious. As you continue to slow down, you enter the theta state.
Theta.
This is a twilight state of consciousness, the borderland between wakefulness and sleep. The brainwaves smooth out into a slow, highly coherent rhythm. In this twilight state, the mind becomes incredibly programmable.
Because the analytical guard is down.
Exactly. The rigid walls of your past identity dissolve and the door is thrown wide open to pure possibility.
And this is where the two systems connect. When the heart's coherent energy, that perfectly expanding ripple from the pond, finally reaches this quieted, synchronized twilight brain, something extraordinary happens.
A state of high coherence.
It triggers an intense, profound arousal in the nervous system, but we must clearly distinguish the nature of this arousal.
Yes, very important.
Unlike the arousal of terror when facing a threat, or the arousal of aggression during a conflict, or even the familiar arousal of external physical pleasure, this is an internal arousal of pure, unadulterated bliss.
Pure bliss.
It is a massive influx of organizing energy that creates an unprecedented orderliness among the massive constellation of neurons in your brain.
It transforms the quieted room into a master symphony orchestra. Hundreds of distinct musicians suddenly playing in perfect, breathtaking unison.
The harmony is so powerful, the acoustic resonance so intense, that it literally reshapes the physical structure of the concert hall itself.
It is a measurable biological upgrade. The nervous system begins sending coherent, healing information to every single cell in the physical body.
Individuals who achieve and sustain this state report profound physical healings, sudden bursts of absolute clarity, and a level of deep, sustaining joy that is completely independent of their external circumstances.
They are experiencing the biological reality of wholeness.
I hear the mechanics of this, and a deep part of me desperately wants to experience that symphony.
Of course.
But I have to bring us back to the sheer, unglamorous, brutal effort this takes.
It's not easy.
Sitting still, ignoring the constant dopamine pull of notifications on your phone, and forcing the mind to focus when it desperately wants to bolt. It feels like wrestling a wild, terrified animal. It is deeply, intensely uncomfortable.
It is vital to acknowledge that discomfort. It is not a passive, gentle relaxation exercise. It is an active biological battle, make no mistake.
It's a fight.
When you sit down in the quiet, your body will throw a massive tantrum. It will demand its usual chemical rush of stress. It will manufacture sudden physical itches. It will urge you to check your email just one more time. It will conveniently and suddenly remind you of a deeply painful memory, just to trick you into feeling the familiar chemistry of your past.
It is the body acting like an addict, screaming, "Feed me the stress. I know how to process the stress. I don't know what to do with the silence."
Yes, the body is fighting fiercely to remain the mind, conquering that visceral urge, recognizing the distraction for what it is, a chemical craving, and gently but firmly bringing your attention back to the present moment again and again and again is the ultimate victory.
Every time you bring it back, it's a rep.
Every single time you bring your attention back from a distracting thought, you are executing a human will that is greater than your automated, hardwired biological programming. You are domesticating the animal.
And on the other side of that intense, frustrating internal fire is absolute freedom.
And when you start operating from that frequency of freedom, from that symphony of internal wholeness, the way you interact with the external world completely shifts.
The magnetism changes.
This becomes incredibly apparent when we look at the most complex mirrors we have in our life, our relationships with other human beings.
The magnetism of wholeness fundamentally alters the landscape of human connection. The deepest truth here, which challenges much of our social conditioning, is that true, profound connection cannot possibly be forged from a state of internal lack.
It can't.
To invite an all-encompassing love into your life, you must become the frequency of love entirely.
Let's examine how the vast majority of human relationships actually function, because it is usually the exact opposite of wholeness. We operate on what the research calls agreements of lack.
Agreements of lack.
Yes, agreements of lack are the invisible, unspoken foundations of countless partnerships, friendships, and family dynamics. Two people come together and bond intensely over their shared grievances.
They complain endlessly about the same political issues. They validate each other's sense of victimhood. They commiserate over the general unfairness of life.
They use each other to reaffirm their mutual dependence on specific survival emotions.
It is the dark glue of ordinary social bonds. The unspoken contract is, I am miserable about this specific thing. You are miserable about this specific thing. Let's be miserable together and label that mutual misery as loyalty.
Exactly. But what happens to the physics of that relationship when one person in that dynamic decides they no longer want to be miserable?
Right when they start healing.
When one person begins to do this rigorous internal work to heal their nervous system, to shorten their refractory period and open their heart center.
It creates immediate, profound friction.
Because suddenly, the person who is healing is no longer showing up as the predictable, validating reflection the other person relies on to feel normal. They are disrupting the familiar pattern.
And to the partner who is still deeply invested in the scratchy blanket of their suffering, this evolution doesn't look like growth. It feels like abandonment.
It feels deeply unsafe to their nervous system.
Which leads to the quiet, pervasive tragedy of compromising your own energy just to keep a relationship familiar. The sensory detail of this dynamic is heartbreaking.
It really is.
It is the feeling of constantly walking on eggshells in your own home. It is physically biting your tongue when you want to express joy because you know your happiness will irritate your partner's gloom.
It is slowly, deliberately dimming your own internal light so the other person doesn't have to squint.
It is a profound act of self-betrayal, tragically performed in the name of love.
But true love requires evolution, not stagnation. When you reach a state of internal wholeness, you realize that compromising your energy to match someone else's lack serves no one. You must stand firmly in your coherent light.
And if you do, the physics of the interaction dictate that one of two things will happen. The first possibility is constructive interference.
Taking a principle from wave mechanics, when two waves of similar frequency meet, they combine to form a wave of vastly greater amplitude.
And they boost each other.
When two people who are already whole, who are actively managing their own nervous systems and taking full responsibility for their own joy, come together, they do not complete each other. They amplify each other.
Their combined energy creates a resonant field with far greater power.
They celebrate each other's evolution. They look at their partner not as a source to extract happiness from, but as a mirror of greatness to reflect light onto.
But the other scenario requires a level of courage that goes against all our conditioning, the courage to release.
If you are deeply committed to evolving, and your partner consistently chooses to remain in reaction, in fear, in the heavy, dense gravity of the past, true love might demand a profoundly difficult choice.
Letting go.
From a place of deep respect, not from a place of anger or judgment, you may realize that holding on to a mismatched frequency is actively detrimental to both individuals. You peacefully part ways, understanding that you can love someone deeply from afar, while recognizing that your energetic paths no longer align.
That brings up a concept I always struggle with in this framework: forgiveness.
Forgiveness.
When you are stuck in the loop of the familiar past, forgiveness feels like a legal pardon. It feels like letting someone off the hook for the damage they caused. How do you look at someone who has deeply betrayed you, someone who has actively and maliciously caused you pain, and feel anything but the absolute need for separation and justice?
When you are operating from the lower energy centers, from the biological imperatives of survival, true forgiveness is almost impossible because the ego demands restitution to feel safe.
The analytical mind demands that the ledger be balanced.
But when you elevate your energy to the heart, when you achieve a state of true internal wholeness, your perception of reality undergoes a radical shift. You look at your adversaries not with the blinding, toxic heat of anger, but with the cool, clear, illuminating light of profound compassion.
The lens completely changes. You see the mechanics behind their actions.
You see them as a version of yourself that you have already outgrown. You realize that their cruel actions, their betrayals, their manipulations are born entirely of their own hidden suffering, their own deeply entrenched agreements of lack, and their own addiction to survival chemistry.
You see the loop they are stuck in.
You do not excuse the behavior, but you are no longer emotionally hooked by it. You realize that holding on to the anger is essentially drinking poison and expecting the other person to die.
Forgiveness in this model is not a moral high ground. It is simply a mechanical byproduct of your own wholeness. You let the grievance go because holding on to the dense energy of resentment actively disrupts your own internal symphony.
It is a self-preservation of your highest state. And as you commit relentlessly to this internal state, as you refuse to be dragged down by the familiar gravity of grievances, something miraculous begins to happen to your external reality.
We enter the final phase of the biological upgrade and the true realization of human potential.
This is where the mechanics transcend basic psychology and touch on the physics of reality creation. Committing to this internal coherence literally alters your physical health, but it also renders you remarkably immune to the chaos of the external environment.
You fundamentally stop trying to force outcomes. The overwhelming majority of people spend their entire lives trying to manipulate matter with matter.
Pushing and pushing.
They push, they strive, they argue, they exhaust themselves physically and mentally trying to bend the dense three-dimensional world to their will. It is an incredibly slow, inefficient, and draining way to create change.
But when you reach this state of high coherence, you change the physics of your approach. You no longer push. You become the vortex.
Think of it like gravity. A massive object doesn't have to reach out and grab smaller objects to bring them into its orbit. Its sheer mass warps the space around it, and the objects naturally fall toward it.
When you become the quiet eye of the storm, your coherent energy acts like that gravitational pull. Because you feel so entirely whole, so deeply satisfied in the generative, expansive present moment, you literally no longer want anything.
The biological feeling of lack evaporates entirely.
And this is the magnificent paradox of human creation. The exact moment you truly, deeply no longer need the external world to provide you with a feeling, you establish the exact magnetic signature required to draw those profound experiences directly to you.
You do not chase the event, you draw the event into your field.
Instead of chasing an outcome across the landscape, you have cultivated an internal resonance so vibrant that the outcome naturally arrives in your reality. And the most liberating side effect of this gravitational shift is the end of material seduction.
The end of material seduction. I love this concept. When you achieve this internal ecstasy, the external rewards that society relentlessly tells you that you must acquire, the status symbols, the fleeting digital pleasures, the constant validation of your peers, they just lose their gravitational grip on your psyche.
You no longer need them to define your identity or prop up your self-worth.
They transition from being necessary crutches for your ego to being purely optional experiences. You can still enjoy the beautiful things of the material world, certainly, but you are no longer possessed by the need for them. Your joy is entirely self-generated. It operates on an independent circuit.
I think we need a concrete example here.
I have one. I want to share a concrete, real-life image that perfectly encapsulates the feeling of this ultimate freedom. Imagine moving through a bustling, highly status-obsessed metropolitan city.
Okay, picture it.
Let's say you are surrounded by the absolute pinnacle of material wealth. You are passing by endless displays of luxury gleaming supercars idling in traffic, high-end boutiques displaying impossible price tags, people draped in designer labels, all of them unconsciously projecting this desperate, heavy aura of needing to be seen, needing to be validated, needing to prove they exist.
A landscape entirely defined by the external projection of identity, the ultimate expression of lack, masking as abundance.
Exactly. Now, picture yourself moving through this exact same dense environment, but you are riding a simple, manual push scooter.
Just kicking along.
You aren't insulated in a luxury vehicle, you are just physically kicking along the pavement. But internally, your heart is in high coherence. You are feeling a profound, untouchable smile bubbling up from deep within your cells.
You are whole.
You look at the frantic displays of wealth around you, and you feel absolutely zero lack. You are experiencing the pure, unadulterated, intoxicating joy of simply existing, of feeling the wind on your face, of experiencing the rhythmic, steady drumming of your own coherent heart. You realize, in that solitary instance, that true freedom is the complete and total absence of needing the external world to validate your existence.
That image is the ultimate biological and spiritual triumph. You are walking firmly in the world, interacting with its matter, but you are no longer of it in a reactive, dependent sense.
You are untouchable.
You are not defined by the material density or the chaotic frequencies surrounding you. You're defined entirely by the immense, expansive, orderly energy within you. And from that elevated state, a manual push scooter brings exactly as much joy as a private jet, because the source of the joy was never contained within the vehicle to begin with. The joy is simply the natural, unforced state of your own synchronized energy.
It is the beautiful paradox we keep circling back to in this conversation. Only when you finally stop demanding that the world give you what you want, does the world suddenly begin to offer it to you effortlessly. The synchronicities start appearing, the path clears, the friction disappears.
Because you have finally fundamentally become a vibrational electromagnetic match to the abundance you were previously only begging the universe to provide.
So if we pull all of these mechanics together, what does this ultimately mean for the listener navigating their daily life?
The core reflection of this entire exploration is a radical redefinition of human agency. You are not the victim of your biology, you are the absolute architect of it. The chemistry of your bloodstream, the neural pathways of your brain, the magnetic field your heart broadcasts, these are not fixed, inescapable destinies.
They are highly malleable, Clay.
And your conscious attention is the hands that mold that clay. But molding it requires choosing to sit in the fire of your own physical discomfort. It requires waking up in the silence of the morning and stubbornly refusing to put on the heavy shoes of yesterday.
It requires looking directly at the familiar gravitational tug of past traumas, the addictive, rushing high of justified anger, and saying to your own selves, no, I belong to the future now.
It is the daily, rigorous, profoundly beautiful practice of overriding the biological survival programming with the elevated resonant frequency of pure creation.
And while we focus so intensely on the individual biological upgrade, the mechanics of this suggest an even more profound corollary. If your individual heart, beating in coherence, generates a measurable magnetic field that alters the space around you, what happens when this scales?
The implications for the collective are staggering. We know from physics that coherent wave sources exhibit constructive interference. If one individual holding a coherent state can literally lower the chaotic frequency of a room simply by being present, imagine the constructive interference of an entire community or a city synchronizing their internal states.
It moves beyond individual healing.
It touches on the possibility of creating a collective, coherent field that could fundamentally alter the chaotic social structures we currently accept as normal. The upgrade of the individual is the required prerequisite for the upgrade of the species.
Which brings me right back to where we started. That quiet kitchen, the ceramic cup in your hand, the day stretching out before you as a complete, terrifying, beautiful blank slate. In a world that profits endlessly from your fear, your constant outrage, your endless digital distractions, and your deep, aching sense of separation, what if the most radical, rebellious act you could possibly commit today is not to fight the external noise, but to simply sit in a quiet room, close your eyes, and stubbornly choose to fall in love with a future you haven't even met yet?